When you see your son spending $8,000 on champagne, while your wife, his mother, is lying in a filthy bed without food or water for 2 days, you understand there are some things in this life that can't be forgiven. My name is John Carter. I'm 71 years old, and I worked my whole life as a civil engineer in Portland, Oregon. Today I'm sitting on the balcony of my apartment, looking at the Pacific Ocean and thinking about how life takes unexpected turns. I've always been a hard-working, honest man, the kind who wakes up at the crack of dawn and only returns home after the sun has set. I've built bridges, roads, buildings, but I couldn't build a decent son. If you're enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Leave in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is when you're watching. Every day there's a new story here on this channel. I'm happy to share with you the sorrows and joys of this old heart that has lived much and learned even more. Sometimes it's good to open up, and perhaps my story might help someone out there. You know my Helen, God rest her soul, and I built a life with a lot of sweat. We saved every penny, planned every step, all to give our only son, Mark, a good life. We paid for private school, expensive college, an apartment. We gave him everything he wanted. Maybe that was our mistake. But how could we have imagined that the boy we raised with so much love would one day leave his own mother lying in a dirty bed, without food, nearly dying, while he spent her money on a yacht with women and alcohol? But let me tell you this story from the beginning. A story of betrayal and ingratitude, but also of justice, because in this life, my son, everything we do comes back to us. It might take time, but it comes back. I was born in rural Oregon, in a small town called Oak Ridge, where everybody knows everybody. My father worked in the lumber industry. In those days, Oregon was nothing but pine trees as far as the eye could see. I grew up watching him wake at 5 a.m., drink black coffee, grab the lunch my mother prepared and go to work. He'd return only at nightfall, exhausted but always with a smile on his face. "Worked honest today," he would say. That stayed with me. I studied with difficulty. I walked to school 2 miles each way, rain or shine, but I was determined. I wanted to be somebody. I got a scholarship to a technical school in Portland, and off I went at 16 years old with a cardboard suitcase and my parents' blessing. I lived in a boarding house, shared a room with 3 other young men, saved every penny. Then came engineering college, working days and studying nights. It wasn't easy, but I graduated. I started my career as a construction assistant, then became a technician, until finally becoming an engineer. I worked on major construction projects, bridges, highways, buildings. I knew every detail, every calculation, every material. The workers respected me because I wasn't one of those office engineers. I got my hands dirty, knew each worker's name, knew their families, cared about them. Mr. John, they called me, respect in their voices. It was on one of these construction sites that I met Helen. She worked in the construction company's office, handling administrative work. A pretty woman with black hair and green eyes, always well-dressed, educated. I started making excuses to go to the office. Need to review some documents, I'd say, just to see her. One day I got up the courage and invited her for coffee. She accepted. From there, things moved quickly. 6 months later, we were married. Our life together was simple but happy. We bought a small apartment in Portland, saving every penny. Helen stopped working when she got pregnant with Mark, our only son. Ah, Mark, how we doted on that boy. Helen practically wanted to wrap him in gift paper, and I wasn't any different. I worked double shifts to give him everything I never had. When Mark was born in 1980, I already had a better position in the company. I was a project manager, earning a good salary, but I still did side jobs on weekends, calculating structures for other engineers, consulting, all to save more money. Helen complained that I worked too much, that I needed to rest. "It's for Mark's future," I would answer, and she would end up agreeing. The boy grew up with all the best: private school, English courses, swimming lessons, a computer when nobody had one. We both made sacrifices. Me working double shifts, Helen economizing on everything. She even cut her own hair to save money. But Mark never lacked anything. I remember once he wanted an expensive imported bicycle. It cost 3 times my monthly salary. I took out a bank loan and paid it off in 12 installments. His joy was worth every penny. When college time came, Mark chose business administration at an incredibly expensive private university. "Dad, it's the best in the state," he said. And who was I to say no? I sold a piece of land I had bought as an investment and paid for his studies. Helen even cried when we signed the check. "It's so much money, John," she said. "It's our son's future," I answered. If only I had known what that future had in store. Over time, we built a reasonable estate. Besides our apartment in Portland, we had 2 rental properties, a small country house outside the city, and a good savings account. All achieved through work, sweat, and saving. Mark graduated, started working at a consulting firm, married a beautiful woman, had 2 children. Our life seemed complete. I retired, so did Helen. We thought it was time to enjoy what we had built, but that's when the problems began. First, it was little things. Mark called less often, cancelled Sunday lunches. When he visited, he kept looking at his watch, anxious to leave. Helen suffered from this, but made excuses for our son. "He's busy, he has his own family now," she'd say. I agreed, but deep down I felt something was wrong. Then the requests for money started. "Dad, I've got an investment opportunity," he would say. At first, they were small amounts, then they grew larger. Helen always gave in. "He's our son, John," she argued. And I, foolish old man, agreed. What I didn't know was that every penny we gave him went straight to women, alcohol, yacht parties, while his wife took care of the children alone at home. But I would only discover that later, in the worst possible way. Everything started falling apart early last year. Helen, my dear wife, needed hip surgery, serious stuff, bone deterioration. The doctor said, normal for her age, which was already 69. The operation was a success, thank God, but recovery would be long. Physical therapy, rest, special care. I prepared to care for her at home, set up the room, bought a hospital bed, hired a nurse for the first few weeks. I wanted my old lady to be comfortable. "John," Dr. Roberts told me after the surgery, "recovery will be slow, at least 3 months before she walks normally again. Even then, she'll need constant physical therapy, careful medication, balanced nutrition." I wrote everything down in a little notebook, word for word. My hair is all white now. My memory isn't what it used to be. I wanted to make sure I'd do everything right for my Helen. "Does your house have stairs?" asked the doctor. "Yes, doctor. We live in a 2-story house. That could complicate things. For the first few months, stairs should be avoided. Do you have any option to stay somewhere without steps?" That's when Mark appeared with a proposal that seemed like a blessing at the time. "Dad, Mom needs special care. My house has no stairs. There's an elevator in the building. It's easier for her to recover there. And I have my beachfront apartment in Newport Beach. Cleaner air, better for recovery." Why doesn't she stay there for a few weeks? Helen liked the idea. She'd always had a soft spot for the ocean. Since we got married, she dreamed of having a little beach house, something simple, just for weekends. We never managed to make that specific dream come true. Money was always tight, priorities elsewhere. And Newport Beach is truly beautiful, I can't deny it. Tall buildings facing the ocean, a nice boardwalk, everything clean. It wasn't far from Portland, about a 6-hour drive. I could visit her on weekends. Mark said he would take vacation time, spend some time caring for her, then return to Portland, and she would stay in his apartment. "The housekeeper comes every day, Dad, and there are neighbors. If anything happens, they'll help. It's just for a few months until Mom recovers properly. The beach climate, the sound of the ocean, it'll help her recovery." I reluctantly agreed. I didn't like being away from Helen, but it seemed best for her. In fact, we hadn't spent more than a day apart in over 40 years. Since we married in 1975, we slept in the same bed, had coffee together every morning. The idea of being without her, even for a few months, gave me a tightness in my chest. But her well-being came first. "It'll be fine, old man," she told me, smiling when I left her at the apartment in Newport Beach. The place was indeed beautiful, spacious, modern decor, a breathtaking ocean view. From the balcony you could see the entire coastline, boats on the horizon, people on the boardwalk. "I'll be back soon. Take care of my plants, she said. We shared a long kiss goodbye. For some reason, I felt a lump in my throat, as if part of me knew something was wrong, but I pushed that thought away. It was just me being a sentimental old man. The first week, Mark called every day with updates. Mum's great, Dad. She's even walking a little around the living room. The physical therapist comes in the morning and she does her exercises properly. I also talked to Helen. She seemed animated, happy. The ocean is so beautiful today, John. I wish you were here to see the sunset. Then the calls became less frequent. Everything's fine, Dad. She's sleeping now. Or, I just saw your call now. Or, the phone battery died. It became harder to speak directly with Helen. There was always an excuse. She's in the bath, she's resting. The physical therapist asked not to tire her with phone calls. My weekend visits were also being obstructed. Not this weekend, Dad. I'm taking Mom to see a doctor in San Diego. Or, the physical therapist recommended absolute rest. Better not to come. I found it strange, but I trusted him. After all, he was our son. That boy we raised with so much love, whom we taught values, honesty and respect. How could I distrust him? 1 month passed, then 2, then 3. The calls became increasingly rare. When I did manage to speak with Helen, she seemed strange, weak voice, tired. Everything's fine, old man. I'm just homesick, she would say. And Mark was always nearby, speaking in the background. Tell him everything's fine, Mom. At first I tried to respect their space. After all, Mark had his life, his job. He was doing us a favor, taking care of his mother. I didn't want to be that annoying old man who keeps calling all the time, bothering. But with time my concern grew. Something didn't add up. Helen would never go so long without wanting to talk to me properly. One night I called her cell phone very late, almost midnight. I thought, if she's sleeping she won't answer, but if she's awake, maybe I can talk to her without Mark around. To my surprise, she answered on the first ring, as if she had been waiting for the call. John. Her voice was a whisper, almost inaudible. Helen, my love, how are you? I'm worried. It's been a while since we've really talked. There was silence on the other end, then a muffled sob. John, get me out of here. I felt my blood freeze. What happened, Helen? What's going on there? Before she could answer, I heard background noises, as if someone had entered the room. The call dropped. I tried calling back several times, but it only went to voicemail. I called Mark. He didn't answer. I sent a message. Nothing. I spent the night pacing the living room, my heart tight. Something was very wrong. The next morning I tried calling again. This time a woman I had never heard before answered. Hello? The voice was young, slurred, as if she had just woken up. Who's speaking? I want to talk to Helen. Oh, the lady. She's sleeping. Mark left. Asked not to disturb her. He said she takes sleeping medication, you know. I found that very strange. What lady, friend? Where was my son? I tried to ask more questions, but the girl hung up. I tried calling several more times, but it only went to voicemail. My concern turned to desperation. I called some friends in Newport Beach, asked them to stop by Mark's apartment, check if everything was okay. Nobody could get in. The doorman said he had express orders from the owner not to let anyone up. I was about to decide to drive there myself when I received a call from the bank manager, where Helen and I had a joint account. He was concerned about strange transactions. Mr. John, excuse the intrusion, but as you're a long-time client, I thought I better call. There are very large withdrawals being made from Mrs. Helen's account. Just this week, it was more than $30,000. I couldn't breathe. What do you mean, Mr. Anthony? What kind of withdrawals? Transfers to hotels, luxury stores, expensive restaurants. Very out of character for you two. I found it strange. He asked me to send the statements by email. When I opened them, I nearly fell out of my chair. In 3 months, more than $100,000 had disappeared from Helen's account. The manager informed me that the withdrawals were made at ATMs or through online transfers, always authorized with her password. It was Mark. It had to be. He was using his mother's money, money we saved our whole lives, to finance a life of luxury. Meanwhile, Helen was there, perhaps needing help, perhaps suffering. I couldn't take it anymore. Without telling anyone, I got in my old car, a 2010 Corolla that still runs beautifully, and drove from Portland to Newport Beach, 10 hours on the road, stopping only to refuel and use the bathroom. My concern was so great that I didn't feel tired, sleepy, or hungry. I only thought about my Helen, about what could be happening to her. I arrived in the city around 2 p.m. on a Thursday. The sky was clear, the ocean blue, tourists strolling along the boardwalk. Too beautiful a city to hide such cruelty. Mark's building was one of those luxury ones facing the ocean. Doorman, cameras, pool, all top-notch. I parked on the street. I didn't care if I got a ticket. I identified myself at the reception. "Good afternoon. I'm John Carter, Mark's father. I came to visit my wife." The doorman, a man about my age, looked at me with a strange expression. He looked down, then to the sides, as if uncomfortable. "Mr. Mark isn't here." "He left yesterday and hasn't returned. Do you want me to call the apartment?" "No need," I replied. "I have the key." I lied, of course. I had no key. But something told me I needed to go up right away, that something was wrong. The doorman hesitated, but eventually let me go up. I think he saw the concern in my eyes, or perhaps he knew something he couldn't or didn't want to tell me. "18th floor, apartment 1802, he said, pressing the elevator button for me. I went up with my heart pounding. Each floor the elevator climbed seemed like an eternity. My hands were sweating, my breathing rapid. I didn't know what I would find, but something told me it wouldn't be good. When I reached the door, I knocked several times. Nothing. Silence. I knocked harder, called for Helen, for Mark. No one answered. I tried the handle, just trying. To my surprise, the door was unlocked. "Helen! Mark!" I called, entering slowly. The apartment was large, beautiful, modern decor, but there was a smell I'll never forget. The smell of sick people, of dirt, of abandonment. The living room was a mess, empty bottles of expensive alcohol scattered around, women's clothing thrown on the sofa. They weren't Helen's. They were young pieces, low-cut food leftovers on the table. I walked down the hallway, calling for her, each time louder, each time more desperate. "Helen, Helen, my love, where are you?" That's when I heard a weak moan coming from the back bedroom. The sound was so faint that if there had been any noise from the street, I wouldn't have heard it. I ran there, opened the door, and what I saw, my God, what I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. My Helen, my companion of 50 years, was lying in a bed, thin, pale, disheveled hair, dirty bedding. She was wearing an adult diaper that, by the smell and appearance, hadn't been changed for at least 3 days. Next to the bed was a tray with moldy food, a half-empty glass of water, scattered pills. On the nightstand was a box of pain medication, another of antibiotics, all apparently untouched. The bedroom window was closed, the curtains too, leaving the environment dark and stuffy. The air conditioning was off, and it was suffocatingly hot. Helen was covered with a thin sheet, but she was sweating profusely. Her skin was red, lips parched, eyes sunken. "John," she whispered when she saw me, her voice so weak I could barely hear. "Water, please." I've never felt so much anger and pain at the same time. It was as if someone had stuck a knife in my chest and was twisting it, twisting. My Helen, my wife, my companion, my entire life, reduced to that state. By whom? By our own son. The son she breastfed, whom she cared for when he had a fever, whom she helped with homework, whom she defended when I wanted to be more severe. I ran to get water for her, helped her drink with a straw I found in the kitchen. She swallowed with difficulty, her lips dry, cracked. I touched her forehead. She was burning with fever. "What happened, Helen?" "Where's Mark?" I asked, trying to control my tears. "He left. Said he was going to buy food 2 days ago," she replied between breaths. "Sometimes he comes, brings women, stays in the living room drinking, doesn't help me." I looked around, searching for her cell phone. It wasn't in sight. "Where's your cell phone, Helen?" "He takes it when he leaves." That's why I couldn't talk to her properly. Mark controlled the phone, only let her talk when he was around, supervising. But this time, in his rush to party, he must have forgotten to take it. I kept looking around the room and saw her phone on the bedside table. I took the device, unlocked it. The password was always the same, our wedding anniversary, and opened the banking app. What I saw left me breathless. Recent transfers, one after another. The last one made that same day, less than an hour ago. $8,700 to Marina Park Hotel with the description yacht service and champagne. Meanwhile, my wife was abandoned, dirty, starving and thirsty, nearly dying. I scrolled down, seeing the previous transfers. Luxury restaurants, hotels, designer stores, jewelry shops. A fortune spent in a few months. The money that Helen and I saved our whole lives with such sacrifice. The money that would be for our old age, to ensure we wouldn't be a burden to anyone. I didn't think twice. I called 911. Emergency, I need an ambulance right now. Abandoned elderly woman in serious condition, dehydrated, with high fever, possible infection. I gave the address, the apartment. The attendant asked me several questions. Is she conscious? Can she speak? How long has she been like this? I answered everything, my voice trembling with anger and desperation. She promised the ambulance would arrive in 15 minutes. While waiting, I tried to do what I could. Opened the windows to air out the room, turned on the air conditioning, changed her diaper, using clean towels I found in the bathroom. It was one of the saddest moments of my life. Helen, always so vain, so careful with hygiene, now cried with shame as I cleaned her. "I'm sorry, John, I'm sorry," she said between sobs. "There's nothing to be sorry for, my love," I replied, swallowing my tears. "The one who should be sorry is that... I couldn't even finish the sentence. There was no name for what our son had done. I tried to give her some food, a canned soup I found in the cabinet. She ate slowly, with difficulty. Her hand trembled so much that I had to help her. Occasionally she coughed, and each cough seemed to tear her fragile chest. "Mark didn't want to," she tried to say, defending her son even in that situation. It was maternal instinct speaking louder than reason. "Don't talk now. Rest. We're taking you to the hospital. You'll be okay." But deep down I knew she would never be the same. Even if she recovered physically, the trauma of being abandoned by her own son, of calling for help and not being answered, of going days without proper food or water, that has no cure. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics were shocked by her condition. "How long has she been like this?" one of them asked me. "I don't know," I replied, "but by the state of the room and the food, at least 2 or 3 days." They carefully placed her on a stretcher. Applied IV fluid, measured her pressure, her temperature. 103.4, said one of them. "Blood pressure 80/50, very low. We need to take her urgently." "Are you a relative?" asked the other paramedic. "I'm her husband." "And who was taking care of her?" "My son. May God forgive me, but at this moment I can't call him my son." I followed in the ambulance, holding her hand the whole time. On the way, she sometimes became delirious, calling for Mark. "Son, help me, I'm thirsty." It was like a stab in my chest each time she said his name. At the hospital, doctors quickly took her to the emergency room. One of them, after examining her, came to talk to me. "Mr. John, your wife has a very serious urinary infection that has already spread to her bloodstream. She's dehydrated, malnourished, I'll be honest. 24 more hours in that state and she would have died." I felt my legs weaken. I had to sit down. "Who was taking care of her?" the doctor asked. "My son, Mark." "This is a crime, sir. Abandonment of a vulnerable person. The police need to be informed." I nodded, but before calling the police, I had something more urgent to do. I took Helen's cell phone, which I had brought with me, and called the bank. "I want to cancel all cards on Helen Carter's account right now." "Password, sir?" 1203, our anniversary. "Cards cancelled, sir." I knew that by doing this I was cutting off Mark's money source, but I didn't care. Let him figure it out. Let him feel a little of the anguish, the desperation he had made his mother feel. Not even an hour had passed when my cell phone rang. It was Mark. I answered, putting it on speaker. I wanted to record that conversation. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" he shouted, his voice altered, loud music in the background. "What are you talking about, Mark?" "I'm on a yacht. Credit card declined. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I felt a lump in my throat, a mixture of anger, disgust, and deep sadness. So it was true. He was on a yacht spending his mother's money while she was nearly dying alone. "Mark, your mother is dying." "What?" "No, she's fine. She's sleeping." "She's in the ICU, almost dead." There was silence on the other end. Then he spoke again, his voice still altered but lower. "You're lying. She was fine yesterday." "Fine?" I was shouting now. "I found your mother dirty, smelling with a diaper full of feces for days, without food, without water, delirious with fever. And you're on a yacht, spending her money on champagne and women." I left the phone recording. Mark started yelling again. "You old son of a beak, ruining my life. The old lady is pretending, just wants attention. Cancel this sakes right now." And in the background, I could hear loud music, women laughing, party sounds, while my Helen fought for her life in the ICU. "You'll pay for this, Mark, in court and in your conscience, if you even have one. Go to hell. I never want to see you two again." "On that, we agree. I never want to see you either. I don't have a son anymore." I hung up. My whole body was shaking. That wasn't my son. It couldn't be. The boy we raised with so much love, whom we gave everything to, whom we sacrificed everything for. It was there in that hospital hallway, with the recording of those horrible words on my phone, that I made a decision. Mark was no longer my son. From that moment on, I had no son, and I would do everything to make him pay for what he did to my Helen. I spent the whole night in the hospital, sitting in an uncomfortable chair next to Helen's ICU bed. The doctors had allowed me to stay, seeing my desperation. Normally they wouldn't let anyone spend the night there, but I think they understood that after everything that happened, it would be cruel to separate us. Helen slept sedated, with powerful antibiotics flowing in her veins, machines beeping around. Occasionally I touched her thin, pale hand, afraid that if I didn't hold it she might disappear. How could this happen? How could our own son be capable of such monstrosity? These questions hammered in my head non-stop. A nurse came in hourly to check vital signs, change the IV, adjust medications. "She's strong," one of them told me, seeing my concern. "She's responding well to treatment." It was during that night, between naps interrupted by the beeping machines, that I began to outline my plan. It wasn't revenge I wanted, it was justice. Justice for Helen, who had been abandoned like an old rag by her own son while he spent her money on luxuries and pleasures. The ICU room had a small window, and I observed the dark sky outside. The stars shone indifferent to the drama we were living. I thought about our entire life together, Helen and me. 50 years of companionship, love, mutual sacrifices. We were never rich, but there was never anything lacking on our table. We raised our son with difficulty, but with much love. What had gone wrong? Perhaps we spoiled him too much. Perhaps we didn't teach him the value of money, of work. Or perhaps, I thought bitterly, some people are born that way, with a void where the soul should be, incapable of feeling empathy. Whatever it was, there was no going back now. The harm was done, and there had to be consequences. In the morning, when the doctors came to make their rounds, the news was a little better. The fever had gone down, the pressure was more stable, but Helen remained in serious condition. "We'll keep her in the ICU for at least another 48 hours, the doctor told me. "The infection is severe, we need to monitor her closely." Will she be okay, doctor?" I asked, my voice breaking. The doctor hesitated. "Physically, I believe so. With the proper treatment, the infection should recede. But the psychological trauma, that's another story. Being abandoned by her own son under these conditions will leave deep scars." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I knew this. The Helen who would leave that hospital wouldn't be the same who entered. Something would break inside her, something that perhaps could never be fixed. I took advantage of her stable condition and left the hospital for a few hours. I needed to put my plan into action. First, I went to Mark's apartment to collect Helen's things and, more importantly, to gather evidence. I photographed everything: the filthy room, the moldy food, the untaken medicine, the dirty diaper in the trash. I took her phone and took screenshots of all the bank transfers from the last 3 months. It was a fortune that had been diverted. $180,000 spent on luxury hotels, expensive restaurants, jewelry, designer clothes. In the midst of my searches, I found something that made me even more outraged: a notebook of Helen's. In the first pages, her handwriting was firm, organized. She noted medication schedules, physical therapy sessions, small daily progress. "Walked 3 steps today without help," said one entry. "Mark took me to see the ocean from the balcony." But as the pages progressed, the handwriting became tremulous, irregular. The entries changed in tone. "Mark didn't come back today. Asked for water, no one came. I'm in pain. Can't reach the medication." The last entry, almost illegible, broke my heart. "John, if you're reading this, forgive me for not being stronger. I kept that notebook as if it were a treasure." It was proof of the deterioration, of the gradual abandonment. It was my Helen's voice silenced by her own son. But my greatest triumph came from where I least expected: the neighbors. As I was leaving the apartment, a lady in her 60s, who lived on the same floor, approached me in the hallway. "Are you the father of the lady who lives with Mark?" she asked hesitantly. "Yes, ma'am. John Carter, Helen's husband." She looked to the sides as if afraid of being heard, and then said, "Your son, he's not a good person. For weeks we've heard screams coming from the apartment, your wife calling for water, for food. He would leave, return days later, always with different women, loud music." I felt my blood boil. "You heard all this and didn't call the police? You didn't do anything?" She lowered her eyes, ashamed. "We called the building manager several times. He said he would talk to Mark, but nothing was ever resolved. Once we called the police, but Mark said it was his mother with Alzheimer's, that everything was under control. He showed some papers, and they left." "Would you be willing to testify to this in court in a legal process?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "What I saw isn't right. Nobody deserves to be treated like that, much less an elderly, sick lady." The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Irene, invited me into her apartment. There she introduced me to her husband, Mr. Anthony, an elderly gentleman with white hair who walked with the help of a cane. "Mr. John," he told me, shaking my hand firmly despite his age, "what your son did is unforgivable. We heard your wife screaming for help through the window. We tried to help, but he always prevented it. Said she was confused, that she imagined things. You heard this with your own ears." "I heard it, yes. And more. I recorded it." My heart raced. "You recorded it?" He nodded and took an old cell phone from the drawer. "I started recording when I realized something was wrong. I thought someday someone would need to know the truth." He pressed a button, and my Helen's weak voice filled the room. "Water, please, someone, I'm thirsty. Mark, son, help me." The tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. It was unbearable to hear that. Mr. Anthony turned off the recording, seeing my suffering. "There's more," he said. "Much more, days and days of this," and her voice got weaker and weaker. That's when I realized I had more allies than I imagined. One by one, other neighbors came to talk to me. The young man from apartment 1801, a university professor who worked from home, the lady from 1803, a nurse who had tried several times to offer help but was expelled by Mark, the elderly couple from the floor below who heard the screams through the ventilation duct. They all had similar stories: cries for help, requests for water, for food. Mark arriving at dawn, drunk with women, ignoring his mother's calls. One of them, a retired lawyer named Dr. Paul, even had audio recordings of Helen's screams. "I thought one day it could be needed as evidence," he told me, and he offered something more, his professional services, free of charge. "What your son did is a crime, Mr. John, and a serious one. I want to help bring justice." I accepted on the spot. I needed all the help possible. Dr. Paul explained the crimes involved: abandonment of a vulnerable person, embezzlement, elder abuse, all with severe penalties, he explained, especially because it resulted in serious bodily harm. Armed with all this evidence, photos, bank statements, testimonies, recordings, I went straight to the police station. The detective, a middle-aged man with deep circles under his eyes, listened to me attentively. When I showed him the photos of the state in which I found Helen, and played the recording of the conversation with Mark. He shook his head in disbelief. In 20 years of police work, I've seen a lot of ugly things, Mr. John. But a son doing this to his own mother, that's a level of cruelty that leaves me speechless. The detective, who introduced himself as Charles Albert, called a clerk and began to formally register the complaint. Do you really want to proceed with this? You're going to prosecute your own son? He's not my son anymore, I replied firmly. He's a criminal who almost killed my wife. I filed a police report for abandonment of a vulnerable person, embezzlement, and elder abuse. The detective assured me he would take all necessary measures. I'll request his preventive arrest today. With this evidence, there's no way he can escape. And I'll communicate with the district attorney's office and the Elder Abuse Council. Your son will answer for everything he did. Before leaving the police station, the detective gave me advice. I know you're hurt with every reason, but think carefully about what you're going to do next. Criminal processes are exhausting, lengthy. Your wife will need to testify, relive all this trauma. Are you sure you want to subject her to that? I thought for a moment. I didn't want Helen to suffer more, but I also couldn't let Mark go unpunished. I'm sure, Detective, Helen will understand. It's a matter of justice. I returned to the hospital feeling relieved, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Helen remained in the ICU but was more lucid. When she saw me, she tried to smile, her lips still dry, her face pale. John, you really came. I thought I had dreamed it. I sat next to her, held her hand carefully. I'm here, old lady. I won't leave your side ever again. Mark, where is he? I hesitated. I didn't want to tell the truth. I didn't want to hurt her even more, but I also couldn't lie. He's not coming, Helen, and it's better that way. She closed her eyes. A tear ran down her wrinkled face. He left me alone, John. Said he was going to buy food, that he'd be back soon, but he only returned 3 days later, always drunk, with women. I know, my love. I know everything. What's going to happen to him? She asked, her voice weak. Justice, Helen, that's what's going to happen. That same night I received a call from the detective. Mark had been found in a nightclub in Newport Beach, still drunk, and was being taken to the police station. When I heard this, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because he would pay for what he did. Sadness because deep down he was still my son, my flesh and blood. The next day I went to the police station. I wanted to look him in the eyes, wanted to understand how it had come to this point. When I saw him in the cell, hungover, still wearing the party clothes from the day before, I didn't recognize the man in front of me. He was no longer the boy I had taught to ride a bicycle, whom I had taken to school on the first day of class, to whom I had given all my love. Why, Mark? I asked, my voice breaking. Why did you do this to your mother? He looked at me with anger, bloodshot eyes. You don't understand anything, old man. That house, that life, it was always too small for me. You are too small. And that justifies leaving your mother dying alone while you spent her money. She wasn't dying, he shouted, grabbing the bars of the cell. She was fine. She just needed to rest. You don't know anything. I know enough, Mark. I saw your mother in that filthy bed, dehydrated, with a diaper that hadn't been changed for days. I heard the neighbors tell how she screamed for help while you were partying. The neighbors are gossipers. She was exaggerating, always been that way, dramatic. I no longer recognized the man in front of me. Where was that bright-eyed boy who ran into my arms when I came home from work? That teenager who, despite his rebelliousness, still respected us, loved us. At what point did he transform into this insensitive monster, capable of letting his own mother die so as not to interrupt his party? Do you have any idea what you did, the crime you committed? Crime? He laughed mockingly. What crime? I took care of her for months, did everything I could. If she got sick, it's not my fault. That's not what the doctor said. He said 24 more hours in that state and she would have died, from hunger, thirst, infection, while you were on a yacht, spending her money on champagne. He didn't respond, just turned his face away. There was no remorse there, only anger at being caught, at losing access to the money, at having to face the consequences. The detective told me, I continued. When they arrested you, you had her credit card in your wallet and had withdrawn another $5,000 from the ATM hours after our conversation. So what? She gave me the card. She's my mother. She wants me to be happy. Happy at the cost of her suffering, her death. She wasn't going to die, you're exaggerating. I left the police station with a heavy heart, but determined to go all the way. I hired one of the best lawyers in the city, using our savings. I want him to pay for everything he did, I told the lawyer. I don't want a deal, I don't want a reduced sentence, I want justice. Dr. Paul, the retired lawyer, Mark's neighbor, also joined the team, offering his experience and knowledge. We'll seek the maximum penalty, he assured me. What your son did is unforgivable. While the process was underway, I took care of Helen with all my affection. After a week in the ICU, she was transferred to a regular room. The infection had receded, but she was very weak, malnourished. The doctors recommended a special diet, physical therapy, psychological counseling. She was lucky, the responsible doctor told me. Many elderly people in abandonment situations like hers don't survive, but she's strong, has a will to live. A week later, I was able to take her home. Our home in Portland, not that apartment in Newport Beach that now only brought horrible memories. I hired a nurse to help with her care, but I made a point of being present at all times. I bathed her, helped her eat, administered the medications. At night, lying next to her in our double bed of so many years, I sometimes heard her crying softly. "Where did we go wrong, John?" she would ask. "How did our son become this?" I had no answer. Perhaps there wasn't one. Perhaps some people are born with this capacity to do harm, even having received all the love in the world. Or perhaps we failed at some crucial moment without realizing it. Whatever it was, the harm was done, and now it was too late to fix it. Mark's trial took place 3 months later. It was quick, with all the evidence we had. The witnesses testified one by one. The neighbors, the doctors, the paramedics. The evidence was overwhelming. Photos, recordings, medical reports. Even the housekeeper, who supposedly went to the apartment every day, confessed she had been paid to lie. In fact, Mark had dismissed her services in the first month, pocketing the money that should have been her salary. Helen also testified, although I tried to spare her from it. She insisted. "I need to look him in the eyes, John," she told me. "I need to understand." In court, fragile, supported by a cane, she told everything. How her son left her days without proper food, how he ignored her pleas for help, how he locked her in the room when he received visitors, how in the last days she was delirious with fever, calling for help without response. "Do you still love him?" asked the prosecutor. She hesitated, looked at Mark, who kept his head down. "I love the son I raised," she replied, her voice breaking. "But that man there is not my son, cannot be." He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. He lost parental rights over his children, who didn't even appear at the trial. His wife had filed for divorce after the scandal, and he was ordered to pay damages of $200,000. Additionally, his name was included in the National Registry of Elder Abusers. But justice didn't stop there. With Dr. Paul's help, I redid my will and Helen's. Before, we had left everything to Mark, our only son. Now 100% of our assets would go to charity organizations that cared for abandoned elderly people. And we added a clause. Mark was declared unworthy based on the civil code. "A son who abandons his dying mother is no son," I wrote in my own handwriting on the document. When the judge read the sentence, Mark finally seemed to understand the gravity of what he had done. I saw the desperation in his eyes when he realized he had lost everything. His parents, his inheritance, his family, his dignity, his freedom. Why, for choosing a yacht and champagne while his mother was dying, abandoned in a dirty bed. "Dad," he called when the guards were taking him away. "Dad, forgive me." I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. That chapter of our lives was closed. Helen and I left the courthouse with our heads held high, hand in hand. We didn't feel joy at his conviction. How could we feel joy seeing our only son being taken to prison? But we felt that justice had been done, and that brought us a certain peace. "Let's go home, old man," she asked me, leaning on me. "Let's go, my love. Now it's just the two of us." On the way, we passed a park where children were playing, laughing, running. For a moment, I saw Mark as a child there on the swing, asking me to push him higher. "Higher, Dad." I want to touch the sky. I swallowed the lump in my throat. That boy no longer existed. Perhaps he never really existed at all. 6 months have passed since the trial. Life has followed its course, as it always does. No matter the tragedies we face, the sun continues to rise every day. The seasons change. Time passes. But some wounds never completely heal. Helen recovered physically, thank God. The infection was cured. Her body gained weight back. Her health improved. But the trauma remained. Occasionally she would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming for water, reliving those days of abandonment. I would hug her, give her water, tell her everything was okay, that I was there, but deep down I knew that a part of her had died in that Newport Beach apartment. She never mentioned Mark's name again. It was as if he had ceased to exist. When someone asked about our son, she would change the subject, look away, sometimes even get up and leave the room. The pain was too great. We went to therapy together. The psychologist explained that abandonment is one of the worst forms of abuse, especially when it comes from someone who should love and protect. The brain doesn't know how to process this contradiction, he said. It's like an emotional short-circuit. Helen improved with time, but she never went back to being the same. That cheerful, talkative woman who loved receiving visitors, making Sunday lunches, now preferred silence, solitude. She only felt safe with me nearby. Mark served 6 months of his sentence and got parole for good behavior. His lawyer argued that he was a first-time offender, that he was repentant. The judge granted it, with the condition that he wear an ankle monitor and report weekly to the court. A week after his release, he appeared at our door. Thinner, short hair, deep circles under his eyes. He looked 10 years older. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking, "forgive me, please." I didn't yell, didn't curse, just replied with a calmness I didn't even know I had. "I'm not your father." "Please," he insisted, tears in his eyes. "I've changed. I learned. Give me a chance." "Your mother called for you for 3 days, Mark. 3 days asking for water, food, help, and you were on a yacht spending her money." I know. What I did was horrible. I regret it every day. I can't sleep. I have nightmares." "And Helen, do you think she sleeps? That she doesn't have nightmares? Every night she wakes up screaming, asking for water. Every night I have to remind her she's not alone anymore, abandoned." He lowered his head, crying. He seemed sincere. Maybe he was. Maybe prison had really changed him. But it was too late. "Mark," I said, using his name for the last time, "there are things in life that have no return. Bridges that once burned cannot be rebuilt. You didn't just mistreat your mother. You abandoned her to die alone while spending her money on luxuries. That has no forgiveness. And God? Doesn't God forgive everything? Maybe. But I'm not God. I'm just an old man who saw his wife almost die because of the son we raised with so much love, and that I cannot forgive, nor should I." I closed the door, leaving him outside. It was the last time I saw him in person. Helen passed away a year after the trial. Her heart, already weak from age, couldn't withstand the sequelae of the severe infection she had. The doctor said it was to be expected. Physical traumas of that magnitude at her age leave permanent marks on the body. On her deathbed, she held my hand and whispered, "John, don't forgive him, promise." I promised. Not out of anger or revenge, but because forgiving would be saying that what he did was forgivable. And it wasn't. Some things are beyond human forgiveness. The funeral was simple, as she would have liked. Friends, neighbors, some distant relatives. Mark didn't appear. I later learned that he stood across the street, watching from a distance. He didn't have the courage to approach. Today I'm 73 years old. I live alone in our apartment in Portland. I visit her grave every week, bring flowers, talk to her as if she were right beside me. "The day is beautiful today, old lady," I say. "You would like to see the blue sky." The last I heard of Mark, he was living on the street. He lost his job after prison. His wife had already filed for divorce. Friends distanced themselves. The money he stole from us ran out. Sometimes I see him begging downtown. I walk straight past, not out of cruelty, but because looking at him is like looking at the biggest failure of my life. What have I learned from all this? That love is not always enough. That raising a child with affection, values, example, sometimes isn't enough. That some people are born with an emptiness inside them that nothing fills, and that in the end we are all responsible for our choices. I found my wife dying alone, abandoned by her own son. I discovered he was spending her money on yachts, women, champagne, while she withered in a dirty bed, dehydrated, hungry. It's an image that will never leave my head. People in Newport Beach know the story. When Mark passes by on the street, they whisper, "That's the son who left his mother to die to spend money on a yacht." The recording of the conversation where he yelled at me, calling his mother a pretending old lady, while music and laughter could be heard in the background, ended up leaking on the internet. It went viral, 2 million views. He became the symbol of the ungrateful son, the monster everyone fears raising. Justice, perhaps, but Helen died, and there's no going back from that. On the most silent nights when longing tightens, I find myself thinking about what could have been different if we had been stricter with him in childhood, if we had better taught the value of work, of money, if we had noticed earlier the signs of what he would become. But these are just useless thoughts. The past cannot be changed. What remains is the lesson. For those who are listening to me, pay attention. Take care of your parents in old age as they took care of you in childhood. Not out of obligation, but out of love. Because one day, if you're lucky, you'll be old too, and you'll understand that there's nothing crueler than abandonment, nor more beautiful than gratitude. Thank you for listening to me until here. If you liked it, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. If you watched until the end, comment below the word abandonment. And don't forget to check out the other stories here on the channel. On the screen there are 2 that you might like. A hug from this old man right here.